Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's Q&A Cafe. This is part one of reporting and creating queries, best practices in SAP Business One with your hosts, Shannon Kennedy, Daryl Goodman, and Tim Singleton. My name is Leo, and I'll be facilitating today. We'll keep everyone on mute and we'll be available for questions toward the end of the presentation. However, if we near our end time of 1 hour, you can always reach out to us with your questions after the presentation. This session will be recorded and will be available on our resource hub and YouTube channel. So please don't forget to subscribe. And with that said, I'll hand it over to Shannon.
Thanks so much, Leo. As everyone knows, reporting is an integral part of any company's day-to-day activities to allow them to run smoothly and run great. And SAP Business One has some standard features that we will be learning about today and in some upcoming Q&A cafes that will allow users to create and share their own reports company-wide. Our teammate Daryl will be showing us today a little bit on creating your own queries and saving them in SAP Business One to allow your coworkers to use them as well. So I'm going to pass this over to Daryl now, and as Leo mentioned, please feel free to ask questions at the end of our webinar or via email. Thanks so much.
You'll see here that we've got the SAP Business One screen in front of you. And as we look at SAP Business One, one of the things that you can do is to go into any particular record. So let's say we wanted to go into the Business Partner Master, okay? And I'll just click into the first record here. And I wanted to be able to find information about these fields. So one of the simplest things that you can actually do inside of SAP to be able to help you design queries or reports or other kinds of things is just simply go into the View menu here, and in your View menu, turn on this System Information. So if you turn on System Information, what will happen is down here at the bottom, you'll see here right now it says Form 0, Item 2, Pane, all that kind of stuff, and that is the area where we're going to see the system information. But if I do something like hover over the vendor number here, you can see that it gives you a lot more useful information. So now you can actually see that on the very bottom right of that string, it says OCRD, which is the table name. So we know that all the information about the Business Partner Master is going to be stored on OCRD or possibly some related tables. And then it also gives you the field name. So here you can see the field name here being card code. It does give you some extra information there with respect to the form number, the item number, the pane, and those will come and become useful in something called a user-defined value, which formerly was known as a formatted search by SAP Business One. But for now, let's just go ahead and start simply and understand the concept of the tables and the names. So as I move to another field, you can see the table stayed the same. So it's still OCRD, but now we're in card name, and that's going to give you the ability to understand the difference between those two different fields. Now inside of SAP Business One, there are some times where you're going to have related tables. So if I go and I hover over an address, for example, you can see because there is a many-to-one relationship, you can have as many addresses as you want associated with a vendor or a customer. SAP is going to store that data in a separate table. So you've got the parent record, which is the customer or vendor, in this case, the business partner. Or I guess technically a lead to be more precise, could be as well, but this one's a vendor. And therefore we have the ability to have an unlimited number of addresses. So you can see that one here is called a CRD1, which is a child table to the business partner master. Now, if you don't already know, SAP Business One does sort of follow that logic fairly consistently throughout the application. So you will see that you start with something, the header table being an O, and then the 3 letters, so CRD. And then after that, they'll be able to drop the leading O and start with numbering. So you'll be able to see when we look at a transaction. So if I open up a sales order, okay, I have a similar concept here where I have the header table, which is ORDR for sales order. And then as I go down into the rows, you can see the rows actually have an RDR1. So that concept is something that you can use. It's not 100%. There are some things where they do not follow that convention, but as a general rule of thumb, if you know what the parent object is, the child objects will generally be the last three letters of that parent object plus the number to be able to allow you to continue. So that's one way to be able to understand the data within inside of SAP Business One. Now, as you go through this, there are going to be some fields where when you hover over it, you're not going to get the table name, the field name. And so in that case, the reason for this is that this field, even though it looks like a field to us and it's on the screen and we can edit it, is not actually a single field. It's actually multiple fields. So it's being virtualized for us in the user interface, and that's because we have both the currency code, in this case a US dollar symbol, as well as the price. And so those are actually two separate fields that are being stored in the system, so that the one is just a numeric value that's storing the actual price, and the other is the currency code that's being used. And so to that end, you will be able to learn when we use that in formatted searches or user-defined values, how to be able to extract that, and I'll show that to you later. But there are going to be some times where you want to be able to understand the data structure in a different way. So one of the things that we have the ability to do is to use the SAP Business One SDK help. As I mentioned, this is a tool that comes for free with your SAP Business One installation. So when you installed your SAP Business One client, there were some other packages that were in that install file. One of them was the SDK, and if you install the SDK package, you can unchoose all the development tools, but just select the help. And this becomes a great tool. As you can see here, it's got a search box where you can simply search anything that you're interested in. And then what it will do is it will give you the field names, the description of the field names, as well as both the type and the size of the field. Now, when you do get to certain fields like the target type here, you can see it will actually give you a breakdown of the valid types. And so you can see here, you have the ability to link to a sales order, to a delivery, or to a AR invoice or an AR down payment. And so therefore, it's showing you if we were to do that, what are the numbers that are associated with this? And again, a sales order could be based off of a document, and if it was, it would be a sales quotation. And so sometimes when you're querying a field, you'll see data that's not all that meaningful, like the 23, and if you don't know what that is, the SDK help is a great way to be able to come in and be able to say, oh, a 23 is a sales order. Now again, as we look here, you can see we have both the price and the price currency as two separate fields that we talked about. Now, in addition, you'll also see that there are several different fields here that have blue hyperlinks. So for example, the warehouse code, as you know, inside of SAP Business One, there's a warehouse setup, and that warehouse setup is stored on a different table. So if I wanted to be able to retrieve information about the warehouse code, I would need to join, which we'll talk about later, to the warehouse table. And so now it's telling me how to be able to know what the warehouse table is. And the nice thing about the help is that you can simply click into it and then be able to get a description and understanding of all the different fields that are associated with this. And of course, you can just navigate back to be able to get to the records. Then at the very bottom of the screen down here, it also shows you some primary keys. So you can see here what's the main thing that drives this table, and you can see the main thing that you would need to do if you were going to ever join or link to this table is to be able to use the doc entry and the line nub. Now, of course, there are other ways to do it as well, but these are some of the key fields here. And then if you wanted to be able to understand how it works with respect to linking back to a base document. So if I want to know how the sales order links to a sales quotation, I'm going to need these three fields here. So again, base entry, base type, and line type. So the SDK Help Center is a very useful tool in being able to understand and working with your data. Now, in addition to that, you also have, as I mentioned, the ability to go online. So if you haven't already used the website help.sap.com, I very much recommend it. It's a great repository of data. Once you get to help.sap.com, you can simply just type in what you're looking for. So if you just type in SAP Business One, you don't need to remember this whole huge URL. You can just simply remember help.sap.com, and then you'll be able to find the SAP Business One page. But within the SAP Business One page, there are a couple of other things that are very useful here. The ones that I'm going to point out today are going to be the online help, which we're going to look at next, as well as the list of how-to guides. And again, within the how-to guides, SAP has a very good document that talks about how to write queries, and it will include a lot of the information that we're talking today. In terms of the syntax of being able to extract data and how to use some of their tools. But once we get past lesson 1, we'll start applying these tools, and that will be where we're going, a lot, above and beyond the documentation. But again, if you do go into the SAP Business One Online Help, you can see they've very usefully structured this with a menu that looks very much like the menu inside of SAP Business One, so you can kind of navigate to what you're looking for. And then, as you can see in here, it's now going to give you information. So if you needed to understand what the different fields do and how that might impact your query, you have the ability to come in here and understand, okay, well, what is gross price and how is it calculated? And if you need to be able to repeat something like that in your query or to be able to modify something differently, again, you'll be able to do so and include or exclude data with a good understanding of the document. And then the last piece of documentation that I want to introduce, as I mentioned, this is page 17 of the document. I'll just scroll up to the top of the document so you can see this is the how-to guide for SAP Business One 9.3. They do update this from time to time. It's something that you can get publicly. So as you take a look at that, what you'll see is in this document, it gives you a section here specifically on writing queries. And in the writing queries section, you'll see that there's going to be some important distinctions between data that is in the system and data that is not in the system. So within this data, there's going to be data that's already posted. So the data that's already posted in the system, we can query. We can go directly to an ORDR or so on and so forth. However, there's going to be times where we're going to want to be able to pull data that is on the screen and hasn't been saved yet. So if I'm entering a sales order and I want to be able to pull some information, let's say from that customer record or whatever, I can't query directly from that. And so you'll see here there are going to be references, and then you can use this guide here to be able to understand some of the references. So the basic syntax is going to be $ and then either the field name, which we saw in the view, so the OCRD dot card code, or you can use this $ bracket $, in which case you use those other numbers that I was talking about. So you'd be able to use the the 4.0.0 to be able to pull those kinds of records. So again, now that we've gone through the documentation and you understand where and how you can find this information, let's go ahead and move into the query wizard. Okay. And so I'm just going to go ahead and close all the extra screens here, and we'll see that you'll find your query wizard is going to be underneath tools and queries and then query wizard. Okay. Now, when you do open up the query wizard, again, as I mentioned, the concept of the query wizard is designed to be a tool that's going to guide somebody through creating a query. So as we click into it, here you can see on the steps here, it asks you to be able to choose the table. Now again, if you know the table, you can simply type in the table. And again, we were able to find the table with the view system information. But if you don't know the table, one of the useful things that you can do is if you hit tab, just like you would on an item master, on a sales order for looking up the item code or whatever, you'll get your choose from list here. And in your choose from list, you have both the name and the description. So what I like to do is to come in here and to be able to find something. So if I wanted to be able to find all the tables related to sales orders, I might come in here and type in sales order and then hit filter. And that will bring just the sales order row, and you can see I was able to find that. Now, if I wanted to be able to find everything that had sales in it, I can go in here and do contains sales order. And now I'm able to see the all those related tables. So again, you can see I know all of these tables are related to the sales order. Now, when I write my queries, there's no one way to be able to write a query, but when I write my queries, I tend to like to start with the row. So what I'm going to do here is just go ahead and click on the sales order row. And the reason I like that is because when I choose the sales order row here, you can see it links me to some very useful tables. So now you can see tables that are related to the sales order are shown down here, and I can simply double click to be able to add the sales order header into the record. Okay, so now that I've selected the tables that I'm interested in here, we go into the next tab, and in the next tab, you'll be able to choose the columns that you want to include from the table. Now again, here it basically is where you would come in and select this. So what I'm going to do is go full screen because I think it just makes it a little bit easier here. And then there is actually a tool where you can do a view fit column width, and as we pick different fields, sometimes that's useful to be able to shrink. But again, here, what I'll be able to do is go into the list of fields, and now again, you can sort them by the field name if you've done the hover over, or you can sort them by the description if you're trying to look for the field. But in this case, what I want to be able to do is to search for card, which were some of the fields that we were looking for before. And we'll search by description instead. I apologize. So we'll come in here and just do customer. Okay. I'm just going to scroll. I do apologize about that, but in any case, what I'm looking to do is to be able to find. Oh, I apologize. The reason I'm not finding the fields is because I came in here and I forgot to change what I was looking for. So you can see I started on the sales order row, and because I was starting on the sales order row, I wasn't able to find the fields that I want because those fields are header fields. So it does help if you are selecting the right table. But as you can see in here, if I type in card, which was what I saw before, I have both card code and card name. You can multi-select your fields and then just be able to come in here and choose them. So now you can see so far I've asked for the records in terms of who the customer or vendor is. In this case, it's a sales order, so it's going to be a customer, and who what their name is. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to change this from sales order back to sales order rows. And now I want to be able to pull in some information about this. So again, I'm going to search for item. So I'll bring that in, and then we'll come down here and we'll also search for line total, which is also known as the row total. So this is going to give me a very basic report. What this will do basically is just give me a listing of all sales orders with a customer and their name, their code and name, as well as what item they bought and the total sales. However, we do have the ability to do some computation. So what we're going to do here is to first of all create a sort. So what I'd like to do is to be able to sort first by the customer, the name. So I'm going to come in here and say that's the first field that I want. And then after that, I want to be able to sort by the row total. So this is going to be sorting by customer name and then how much they bought. Now over here, you can see this is going to be smallest to largest. Typically for these kind of reports, I'd want to be able to see it in largest to smallest. So I want to see what items they bought the most of first. But because of the fact that we are just doing it like this is going to show me every single row over and over again. So if I want to be able to get a total by item, so I can see the total by item, what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to want to say that I want to do a sum. So I can come in here and I can do how many records were there, how many different items were there, the average, the minimum. But in this case, I just want to do a sum, which in the query wizard is called an amount. But if I was to try to continue with this, I'm going to get an error because once you do a computation, it now needs to know what to do with all of the rest of the fields that are not part of a computation. So that's going to be called something called grouping. So what I'm going to say is that I want to create a group here. And so now I have the ability to come in here and do the grouping. And so I will get the sum by item within the customer, and that will give me the total sales by item for the customer. Okay, so again, at this point, we've talked about how we're going to do the sort type, what kind of math we want to do, which is what a computation is, and what we're going to do with the fields that are not part of math. All right. Basically, we're going to say that that's enough for us, and we'll go ahead and hit next. And it's going to bring us to a next step here where we can specify conditions. So conditions are essentially filters. And one of the things you can do in here is like Excel, you can use parentheses. So if you needed to be able to make something more complicated, you have the ability to do that. But what I want to do here is I'm just going to say I want the sales order to only be for the current year. And so as a result of it being only for the current year, I'm going to go ahead and choose the doc date, which is the posting date here. And then I'm going to say that I want it to be greater than or equal to. And since I am not choosing relation to another field, I'm just typing it in. I'm going to come in here and say that I want it to be greater than or equal to the beginning of this year. Oops. Okay, and you can see that I now have my condition in here. And of course, you have the ability to put in additional conditions if you want to. But when you're done, it will show you the syntax of the query, and then you can go ahead and hit finish, and you get your results. And so now you can see we've just successfully written our first query, and you can make it where you can drill in, you can see these different things, and so you have the amount here for the total. Okay, so what we can do is we can save this, and what you can do is in here, this is the ability to work with the query manager that we're looking at later. So you have the ability to come in here and manage your categories. So if I needed to be able to save this as a particular type of thing, I can come in here and do my queries. Okay, and then I can add that. And what that will do is it will list it into the list of things that you can choose. So my query is here. And then there are permissions that are associated with queries as well. So you can choose in your general authorizations who is going to be allowed for this. So we'll just go ahead and select all and then update this. All right, now that we've saved this, I've got my category. I'll save it in my query, and this will be Daryl. And we'll save that. Okay, and now we have the ability to come and run that whenever we want. So that's the query wizard. Next, we're going to move into the query generator, and I'll show you a little bit more complex query writing, and then we'll move into using some of these queries as we get into lesson 2, which will be coming up shortly thereafter. Okay, so again, in order to be able to open up the query generator, you're going to go into Tools, and then Queries, and then Query Generator. Now you'll notice that the query generator user interface is a little bit different. So rather than having multiple steps that are walking you through the steps, you wind up with just this box here. And you also see that we have the ability to edit and directly work on the syntax in these boxes right away. So again, if you know the table name that you're looking for, you can just simply go ahead and edit it. Or again, you do have the same ability to come in here and do your choose from list. Since we're now in the generator, I'm going to go ahead and use some of the information that I already got with my hover over. And so what I'm going to do is we'll start with the ORDR. And then in this case, you can see here that it now shows me a list of different fields. Now, one of the nice things about this is that if you type in a related field, so in this case, I'm going to type in I typed in the header first and then the lines. You can see here that it automatically built what's called a join. A join is going to be the area where you tell your query how you want to be able to link data from separate tables. And so sometimes it's going to be very straightforward. Like here you can see I want to join the rows of the sales order to the header of the sales order based off of its link. It's doc entry here, but sometimes you'll have more complex joins where you might be joining data that's not naturally related. Maybe you've got a user defined field that's got a salesperson for like a salesperson 2 or something else along those lines. And so in that case, you're going to be able to come in here and edit your join and be able to change the relationship to be able to make one that SAP wouldn't normally know about. Now, one of the nice things about the query generator is that fields that do have underlying tables are bolded. So one of the things that you can do is you can simply drag and drop the field over, and you can see that we'll go ahead and build the new join here. Now, Unfortunately, for those of you that are using HANA, if you're using SQL, this is not a problem, but if you are using HANA, when you do the drag and drop method, it is basically still operating in the SQL mode, and HANA is case sensitive, so you will need to come in here and edit your join to be able to put in the quotes to be able to tell HANA that the field name is not to be all capitalized. So if you do use the drag and drop functionality, just be aware of that when you're using HANA. Okay. The next thing is that once you've joined a table, so again, we started with the order, we then joined the sales order, we've now joined the business partner. The reason that we might want to join the business partner table, the customer table in this case, is there might be some information that's stored on the customer that we want to include in our report that's not directly on the sales order. But sometimes inside of SAP, as we talked about earlier, there's going to be data that's not that meaningful. So if I wanted to know which customer group this customer belonged to, so I'm executing my sales orders, I could pull the data directly from the customer record, but it's unfortunately just going to be an internal number inside of SAP, and that's not typically useful to your people who are reading your query or your report. So in that case, it's often useful to be able to go ahead and drag another related table. So you can see I've gone from the sales order header to the customer record and now to the customer group field because I want to be able to choose the group name. And so I do apologize. I did mean to come in here and select some fields as we were going through, so I'll just go back and do that. So what we can do here is I can say from the sales order, I'm interested in the document number, also the document date, and we'll take the customer's code and the customer's name from the sales order. Now that I've got that, and I go to the lines, from the lines, I'm interested to know what item was sold. Again, I'm also interested in knowing the row total. So you can see here, I'm going to grab that, okay? And that's pretty much the query that we had before. But now we're going to go to the customer group, and with the customer group, we're going to now come in here and choose the group name, which is something that's more useful for us than the group code. Okay, and then finally, we'll come back here, and so once you've gone down this path, if you want to be able to choose something from the sales order again, you can simply click on the sales order. It will again load up the sales order table, and we can find additional related tables here, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to grab the shipping type, which is called transport code, and drag that over here. And once again, when I do that, you'll see here that I need to once again correct the joins. So we'll come in here and put in our quotes for the tables that I just recently added. And this is going to give me the opportunity to go back to the PowerPoint for a moment because I do want to talk about the joins. So you'll see here that every time I added a table, you can see that SAP considered it an inner join. So let's understand a little bit more about what the joins are. So when you talk about joins, as I mentioned, it tells you how you link the data. But what you can think of it is an inner join, as you can see here, is basically where something has to be in both sets of data. So for example, if I wanted to be able to find the sales order rows that are associated with the sales order, it needs to be in both. Otherwise, I don't want all sales order rows, okay? And then I may have a situation where I want to be able to join something optionally. So for example, it's possible to have a sales order that does not have a shipping type. You can leave the shipping type field blank. If I was to do an inner join on the shipping type table, what that's going to mean is that I would only get sales orders for the customer that had shipping types. Any other sales order that did not have a shipping type would be excluded from the results altogether. And so that's not something that we want to be able to do. So in this case, you could see I would typically want to use a left join or a left outer join. And those are, in my opinion, the most common queries that you're joins that you're going to use. Is the inner join, where I want to be able to be specific. I only want the sales rows that are associated with the sales order header, or left joins, where I want to be able to pull in data optionally if it's there. So a left join basically means if I'm starting from the universe of sales orders, which is this blue dot here, and then I bring in the universe of shipping types, okay, I want to keep all of the records that are from the sales orders, even if there's no corresponding data in the shipping types table. And so that's going to be a left join. Of course, there are additional joins that you can use as well. It's going to be a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm able to cover given the time that we have. So I did want to just bring this to your attention where you can see the different types of joins and understand that there are joins. I was able to pull this from this website here. There's several good other websites that explain the concept of joins as well. And as I mentioned, you'll be getting this slide, so you'll be able to have both this graphic as well as being able to link to the source data. So now that we understand that, it's going to be important for me to be able to change or understand the different rules. So let's start from the top. So I have my sales order, and one of the things I like to do here is just to enter because it makes it easier for me to be able to see everything. So I'm starting with my sales order, and then I'm joining to the sales order rows. And it makes sense to me that I want to use an inner join because I only want the rows that are associated with that sales order. Then you can see I joined the customer. Now, it won't hurt to change this to a left, but I know that every single sales order has to have a customer inside of SAP Business One. That's mandatory, so I can leave that one alone as well. Then I'm joining here to the customer group code. And again, you might want to change this one to a left. It won't hurt anything, but because every business partner record must have a customer group, it, again, won't hurt anything to be able to leave that alone. So we'll leave that one as an inner. And now I get to the OSHP table, and I get to a field that's optional. So this is where I really want to be able to come in here and change this to a left, and I used to use left outer join to be able to describe how I want the data to be able to come from the system. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we'll just go ahead and execute this. And you can see I now have a query similar to the query that we had within the query generator. Again, you can expand to be able to see the syntax. The little pencil here is useful sometimes if you want to be able to make some minor edits. It's useful to do it in the preview. Otherwise, you can hit cancel to be able to come back into the wizard. Again, what I want to do here is I'm just going to go ahead and save this one. So I'm going to do save as. It will then bring up my my queries here, okay? And so I'm going to go ahead and save this one as sales analysis, okay? In my queries down here, you can see I have sales analysis queries. So this is the sales analysis where I've got my sales analysis by customer group. So I can just go ahead and I can type over this and save over it. It will overwrite the query, or I can give it a unique name. So if I want to come in here and call it sales analysis group 2, I can do that, and that will become a saved query. Now, if we cancel back into this, that's a very simple query, but now we have the ability to put in some additional things. So again, we have that where clause, which was the conditions in the wizard, the sort, which was the same concept, and then the group function to be able to work on that box. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put in a condition where I'm only interested in seeing closed sales orders. So I only want to see sales orders that have actually been finished. So we'll come in here and we'll go into our sales order table. And in the sales order table, you can see there's a field called doc status. Again, if I didn't know what field I was looking for, the easy way to be able to come in here and do that is to hover over the field, and it will tell me the field here for the doc status or to look at the documentation. So I know, again, that there are different options in this. And so this field can be either open or O, or closed, which is C. So if I was to do a filter like this, this is going to find only open sales orders, okay? And so you can see if I look at the number of results, there are a lot in this particular database here. So I've got 2016 rows versus if I change this to a C, so I'm only looking for the closed, which is what I want to be able to do. You can see here I'm going to wind up with a different record count. So I won't expand it, but you can see I'm already in the 5,000s. Okay, so the filters do change which data set that you want. Of course, if you leave the filter out, it will be all of them. Now, there are going to be some times where we want multiple conditions. And so you can see here, there's actually a button called conditions here. And in the conditions, what we can do is just expand this to make it a little bit bigger. You can actually come in here and use an and. So if I come in here and specify and, it allows me to be able to specify a new field. And so in this case, if I wanted to narrow it down to just a specific customer group, what I have the ability to come in here and do is to come in here and grab the customer group. Now, one of the things about the customer group is that I can say that I want it to match or not match or whatever, but let's just assume in this case I want it to be equal to. And at this point, I could hard code a particular customer group. So if I knew that I was interested in just one particular group and I wanted to use it for reporting, I would just type it in here. But there's also this concept of a variable. And the variables are pretty useful because it gives you the ability to not specify the value in the query, but rather to allow it to be executed and the user to be prompted. So now you can see the same exact query that we ran before, but I've added a second parameter or condition, and I put it in with a variable. So now you can see when I execute that, it now asks me which group name do I want. I get a very nice lookup here, and I can hit choose. And now it's only showing me records that match that criteria. So it had to be both closed and part of the distributors group. Okay. Of course, right now it's kind of like a little bit of a mess here. It's sorting by document number and those other kinds of things. So I can come back in here and decide that I want to do a sort. And if I want to create a sort, what I want to be able to do is I'm interested in seeing it by, let's say, item code first. So I want to see the sales by item. And then after the item code, I am interested in seeing it by, what's my place here, by customer. So I'll come in here and say that I want to find it by customer name. Okay, and now when I hit execute, again, I can come in here and choose distributors. You can see that it's now sorting first by item. So you can see the item number repeats. So I can see all the different customers that bought this item, and I can see then by customer. Okay. Now, if I do want to be able to do math inside the query generator, I'm still going to be able to do it, but I have to be able to do that myself manually. So one of the things that I'm going to do is to just go ahead and copy and paste everything that's in the select box up here and just paste it into the group by box. And it's just a little trick that I use. There's other ways to be able to do this, but now what I want to do is I want to take out the fields that I'm not interested in grouping by. Because if I was to group by document number and document date, then it's going to basically always make sure that those records are unique, and I want to be able to get a total by customer of what we're spending. So I'm just going to delete those from the system altogether. I mean, from the group by box altogether. So now I'm saying, okay, I'm grouping by customer, and if I'm grouping by customer, their name is going to be unique. I'm interested in grouping by item, but I'm not interested in grouping by line total. And the reason I'm not interested in grouping by line total is the same kind of thing. I want to be able to summarize the line total. So once I've decided to summarize the line total, I can go ahead and just delete that as well. And as I mentioned, now what we're going to have to do is those fields that I deleted, we have to go ahead and put an operation on them. So as I put an operation on them, you can see I'm now grouping by unique fields here. I'm going to come into this box here, and I'm going to make the modifications to be able to put this in. So one of the things that we have the ability to do is to use an operation called max. And so what the max will do is it will give us the biggest sales order number. Now, since I'm giving it the biggest sales order number, I can come in here and I can specify a column name. So if I specify the column name, you are able to identify what this is to the user. So I'm just going to call this the last order number. Okay, and then as we presume into the document date field here, I need to be able to identify that as well. So I'm going to do max, and we're going to grab that thing. Now the as is actually a good habit because it makes it easy to label, but it is optional. So if I just hit space and then put my column descriptor before the comma, you'll be able to do that too. So I can come in here and say last order date. Okay, so I've now used the labels with and without the as, and finally I'm going to get to the field that I want to summarize. So I'm just going to come in here and do sum of the line total. And again, I'm going to give this a field label. So we'll come in here and just do total sales. So I'm going to click OK to that. You can see it put everything back into the box. I can execute this again. We'll choose distributors, okay? And you can see that I now have my, when it was last ordered, the date, the different products, the total sales. Now inside of a query, just so that you know, if you didn't already know, if you hold the control key and click on a column header, it will give you a summary. So you can see my total sales for this were 1.5 million or 1499 million. And so that's kind of a useful thing to be able to get, in any of these queries. But again, perhaps I want to now be able to see which of my top selling items were. So I can come in here and use math in my sort. So the final thing that I'm going to come in here and do is to create the sum. What we're going to do is first I want to be able to get let's make some mathematical fields that are just going to be useful in being able to derive additional data here. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a field where we're going to count the number of records. So I'm going to go ahead and take this field here called the sum of total sales. Okay, and I'm just going to copy and paste this, okay? And instead of the sum, I'm going to use a different operation, and I'm going to use count, okay? And so this can now be called, let's say, times sold, okay? So I'm able to make another field, okay? And then what I want to be able to do is to create another field to be able to get the average sales. So the average sales would now be the sum of the sales. So we'll go ahead and we'll paste that here, and we'll just clean up the extra comma, okay? Divided by the count of the total sales. So we'll go ahead and we'll grab that here, and we'll put a divided sign and paste that in here as well. Now, again, I like to put in parentheses because it helps me be able to see visually what we have here. And I also need to delete these field labels because they're not needed as part of the math. Okay, so I've got my sum of sales divided by the count of sales. Okay, and then we're going to come in here and we're going to use this as average sales. Average sale. Okay, so once we've done that and we click OK, I want to be able to see everything sorted by the average sale. So we'll come in here and grab this here, okay, and then paste that into my sort box, okay, and I'm just going to get rid of the record here, okay. So if I go ahead and I hit execute on this again and we choose distributors, you can see here that I've now created some additional columns, and you can see here that this is now sorted by the average sale, okay, but it's still sorting by customer and group first. So what I can come in here and do is if I want to change the sequence of this, you can simply grab the columns and move it around. So if I want to sort first by the average sale, okay, and then by item code and by customer, you can do that, and then it will change the sort order. Okay, so basically you can see we're almost done with this lesson, and then we're going to move into lesson 2. The last thing I want to show you is just being able to understand the ascending or descending. So again, this is in the wrong for the report. So I want to be able to come in here and just expand this to just be descending, and that will be our final part of this lesson. Okay, and I've got my query, and we'll go ahead and we'll save this as sales analysis. All right, so that's pretty useful stuff. We've just learned how to be able to create query wizard, query generator. The last tool, which we kind of talked about before, is just the query manager. And of course, within the query manager, I now have the opportunity to come in here and find my queries that I just saved and to run them. So anything that's in the sales analysis here, you can double click to execute on, and to be able to just run those queries after you save them. If you collapse this, it becomes more user-friendly for the users. And of course, you can export it to Excel or do anything else that you want to be able to do. There are a couple of other cool things that you can do within the query manager as well. So within the query manager, you can actually create a report. So if I come in here and let's take a look at one of the system reports here that you'll all have. And if I look at the system report for inventory value, for example, okay, you can see in here that you've got this report, but you see right now it's grayed out. There's no ability to print this. So one of the things that you can do is you can go ahead and click on Create Report, and this is going to create a simple report using the Print Layout Designer. So you can see there's a base template here. I can give it a name, or I can just use the default name. And as soon as I do that, I now have a print preview that will actually allow me to be able to see this data in a Crystal report, not a Crystal report, a PLD report format that you can use. In addition, you can edit them. I mean, you get your pencil and all those kinds of things. But in addition, you'll also have the ability to come in here and schedule a report. So I can come in here and specify, typing in my username and password that I want it to execute as, and I can have it specify that I want this report to be run. And it is able to do a basic email. So I'm able to come down here and just add recipients like you would in using the messaging system. So I can say I want it to come to me, and whether or not I want to be able to have it in my overview, or if I want it to be sent through SBO mailer as a PDF or whatever. But what this is going to give me the ability to do is to add this. And I got to put in my password. And then anything that you want in your overview is going to be here in your scheduled reports overview. And so you can see I'm able to come in and review my reports. And if they had actually executed, I'd be able to see the PDF or those other kinds of things as well. So that's the ability to schedule a report that you've saved inside of a query manager. So let's go ahead and move back into lesson 2. And in lesson 2, the purpose of what we're trying to achieve here is being able to develop a digital assistant. And again, the reason that we want a digital assistant is to be proactive in communications. And one of the great things is to be not only proactive with employees, but your customers, your vendors, or even, as it says, yourself. So you are able to make it so that it's more efficient for you to be able to do that. So in this particular case, we're going to go through a couple of different features inside of SAP Business One. So specifically the concept of UDVs, again, formerly known as formatted searches, the ability to use alerts, and the ability to use approvals. And then finally, we're going to use one of the Resolve modules, which is the Data Messenger module, which is part of the Resolve suite that's going to be able to extend functionality beyond some of the capabilities that SAP offers out of the box, but the concepts of the queries are the same. Now, the one thing that we're going to do here is this is now going to be a little bit more like a cooking show. I've already got all the queries defined, so I'm not going to write the queries again. I will take the time to explain some of the queries as we use them. But in order to be able to understand the business cases and so on, we'll just use those things. So let's take a look at some of the examples that we're going to be going over for. So first of all, one of the things we might want to do is to be able to improve our accuracy and reduce redundancy in doing order entry. And so you can see I have 2 examples that are associated here. For me, I do it all the time and I hate it. I'm entering a sales order and I always forget to fill in a delivery date. And so I get the red bar message, and that's something that a lot of customers will have a standard term that they want to be able to use for the delivery date, either the same day or maybe it's 2 days from now or whatever it's going to wind up being. So I'm going to show you how we can get that to be automatically populated. And then we'll use a little bit more complex example where we're going to pull some information from the screen to be able to set the dimensions, which are part of the cost accounting features of SAP Business One. to set those dimensions based on an item group code. All right, and then if we look again, what's the business purpose of what we're trying to accomplish? We want to be able to increase the customer service levels and rates. So I want to be able to find a salesperson. I want to find for my salespeople any customers that have not placed an order in the past 30 days. So typically, if I'm getting orders from somebody and all of a sudden I get a slowdown and I don't get an order from them in a month, I want my salesperson to reach out and say, hey, why? And try to be able to facilitate that. Same thing for being able to fulfill, stock. Just a simple one. And there's some of this ones are redundant. There's a built-in query that can do this, but I just wanted to show you an example of one that could be based on text. So we're going to look at items that are below their minimum order quantity. Finally, we'll take a look at being able to do things like, hey, I've placed a purchase order. I want to know when it comes in. Well, typically that's two separate people, right? So the person that places the purchase order is working inside the office, and you have a warehouse that's receiving the product in, and that's going to be a different user who is creating the GRPO. And so I want to be able to use the power of the queries to be able to get it to notify me that I have, in fact, successfully received my purchase order by somebody else that did it. So it won't show up in SAP's My Activities because I wasn't the person that created the GRPO, but we can still get notified. Using SAP's approvals, we'll be able to take a look at how we can make sure that we've ordered something properly. So if somebody modifies the payment terms from the what's specified on the customer, I want to be able to review that and decide whether or not I agree or don't agree with the change in terms. Or if someone is going to buy something from a vendor, maybe I've gone through a whole process through QC or otherwise to be able to pre-select vendors that are approved to sell me my products. As you know, SAP Business One does have preferred vendors, but it doesn't mandate that you buy from those preferred vendors. So you can buy any product from any vendor. Using this, it will give me the ability to have an approval. So if anyone places a purchase order with a vendor that's not on that approved list, it will stop the purchase order, go through the approval process. Finally, we'll take a look at understanding what we can do with vendor lead times. So if I have placed a purchase order, a lot of you are already using some of the built-in tools from SAP or third-party tools to be able to have that purchase order go directly to the vendor. And that's awesome because it just saves a step, and I totally agree with that. But how am I sure that the vendor actually got my PO if I'm not talking to somebody or giving them the PO or anything else along those lines? So one of the things that we can do is we can have the system automatically review to see whether or not we've gotten back an acknowledgement from the vendor, which we're going to use by using the vendor's reference number as the key. So if we don't have a vendor reference number after 2 days, we're going to go ahead and call the vendor and ask them to confirm or send them an email, whatever it's going to be able, in this case, it'll be an email to ask them to confirm why they haven't given us the confirmation, and just to be able to ensure that our purchase order will actually be accepted and delivered on time. And then finally, some simple things that you've probably seen and gotten used to as a consumer, but there's no reason that you can't do this from your ERP system as well to your customers. So as soon as you place an order online, a lot of the times you get an email with your order. We call that a sales order acknowledgement. So how you can send that by email. And then when the product ships, they've signed up with their mobile number. You want to send them a text message, so you can send them a text message out of the system to be able to say your product is shipped and give them the tracking number and those kinds of things. Okay, so what's going to wind up happening here is, again, for the purpose of providing this data to you, I will have a slide that's going to identify each one of those examples and to give you the concept of what the actual syntax is. So you can take these queries and directly implement them. What I am not going to do is I'm not going to go through each one of these in PowerPoint slide. I just think that would be boring. So we talked about here, again, I'm going to open up my sales order. And once I open up my sales order, I'm just going to go ahead and go to a new one here, and I'll enter in my center port. Okay, and now you'll see here that as soon as I entered in center port, it automatically populated the delivery date, and the delivery date was 3 days greater than the posting date or today's date. Now you'll know that there's a user-defined value or formatted search based off of this indicator here. So this little magnifying glass tells me that this field is being updated by a query. And again, if you don't see that in your system, what you want to be able to do is go into View, Pickers, Display, and then turn on the indicator here for user-defined values. So now how did I get this to work? Well, if you go into the tools and then go into your customization tools, and you go into your user-defined value setup, which you can also do with your Shift-Alt F2. It will bring up a screen here, and you can do this from any field on the system, where I can either say I want it to be, normal without a search, or I can, define data, or I can have it run a query. And so if I do run a query, you'll see it opens up my query manager here, and I'm able to come in here and see the different queries that are on the system, okay? Now, if I go into my query manager, you'll see here that I've created a user-defined values or formatted searches category here, and you can see that that query that I've chosen is plus 3 days. And so if I execute on this, this is one of the things that I referenced in the documentation. And in that documentation, I specified that it is going to be able to pull from the screen. So within, sorry for the pop-up, within the screen here, the reason is this sales order hasn't been added yet, so I can't go query ORDR to be able to get this document date. So I am saying that I want to add a number of days, and the number of days that I want to add is 3, and I am pulling it from the screen. So I use this $ bracket $ 10.0.date, and again, that syntax for you is in documentation. Now, the reason it says from dummy is because I'm not pulling it from any table. I'm just pulling it from a screen. This is something that's required for HANA. It's not required for SQL, but either way, you'll be able to come in here and use the syntax to be able to pull from that screen. So again, if I hover over this field here for posting date, you can see it says form 139, item 10, pane 0. So that's where the 10.0 came from. And then the fact that this one was a date was where I was able to come in here and get the date. So you can see that now is populated, okay? And then similarly, I was able to come in here and specify another query. So if I come in here and I grab my dustpan, for example, okay, you can see here that it automatically filled in my dimension. And again, you can see concept is the same here. So if I use my Shift-Alt F2, you can see I was able to run a query. And this query here is going to be based off of the item group, okay? And so if we, once again, take a look at our query manager, and I accidentally closed it, so I'll just open it again. In the query manager, we go down to our queries. You can see this query is a little bit more complicated than the last one, not overly complicated, but here you can see I was able to do a case statement. A case statement is a type of query where it's sort of like if you ever used an Excel if, or something else along those lines. What I'm doing is basically saying that I want to select from the item table, okay, the item group, and what I'm doing is I'm passing the item code from the screen. So here you can see the 38.1.0 is from the screen, and I've passed that through, but I've now joined the other tables, and I was able to come in here and say, okay, when it's item group 100, I want it to be this dimension. When it's item group 110, and otherwise I want it to be this last one. So now I've really just made my order entry much more efficient. All I have to do is enter my customer, enter in my item, and the rules that I have for being able to make sure that I properly cost things are all going to be just automated here, as well as being able to follow my my rules for the due dates. Okay. So that's the first part of using a digital assistant, is just being able to understand the user-defined values and the power that they have to be able to retrieve data from things that are off screen, to be able to bring data together and help you select those kinds of rows. All right, so what we can do is just go ahead and cancel out of the sales order, and let's go ahead and take a look at alerts. Now, within alerts, okay, you can see here underneath administration, you're going to have this tool here called Alerts Management. And Alerts Management is a pretty cool tool. And what that's going to give you the ability to do is to use some predefined alerts that you guys know about already, where you've got these gross profit deviations and so on and so forth. But you also have the ability to create one with what's called the query here. So if I come in here and I activate this and I do based on the query, you can see here that I'm able to specify how frequently I want this to run, whether or not I want to save the history, and whether or not I want it to go internally or by email. So you can see here right now I have it set to do an internal message. And let's go ahead and take a look at this query. Now, this particular is showing me that I do have some stuff that I've received. And so you can see you can write whatever you want for the context of the report. So and you can see I am getting my notifications. You can write whatever you want for the context of the report here, and I'm able to specify where I'm pulling it from. So the PDN is the delivery table, actually the rows of delivery table. And from the PDN, I was using the link back to the purchase order. So I'm interested in goods receipt POs that came from purchase orders. And again, if you remember when we talked about the SDK help, it told me how to be able to go back to the base object. And I used the base type, the base entry, and the baseline. So that brings me back to the purchase order. Then from the purchase order rows, I was able to join back to the purchase order header. Okay. And then here I also wanted to pull something from the goods receipt PO header. So you can see I've got my goods receipt PO header, so I can see what products were received, the quantity that were received, which vendor we received them from, and which PO number. Now, the reason that this is useful here is because I specified I wanted to know who created the PO. So inside of SAP Business One, if you go into your query generator here and we take a look at OPOR, which was my table, okay, you can see that there is a field that you don't normally see on the screen, although you can see it in changelog. But basically it's called user sign. So here you can see user sign, okay? So this is where SAP is storing who created the purchase order. Now you notice it's bold. So the reason it's bold is because it's actually linking to the OUSR table. So within the user table in the system, everybody that logs in, even though I log in as Daryl into the system, I actually have a number associated with that. So what I've done is I came in here and I said, when these people enter in a purchase order, I want them to be able to get it. And then in order to be able to make it so that I don't get notified all the time about all of my existing GRPOs, I went in here and put in some filters. So I said it had to be created today, and the timestamp needed to be that it was created within the past, and you have the ability to come in here and configure whatever it is that you want to configure as your time using the timestamp. So again, more fields that are available for you inside of SAP Business One, the create date and the timestamp, those are things that are in there and can be used as part of your query. And then what this will do is when it executes, you can see I'll be able to get my message. So here you can see it shows me a list of all of the purchase orders that were received. And so this way, even though somebody else did the receiving, I'm able to come in and to be notified of that. Okay, so that's one example.
Great. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending today. And thank you to Shannon, Daryl, and Tim for hosting. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to our team. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel just to ensure that you stay up to date on all of our past and future Q&A cafes.